Hi, I'm Andy Bush. Welcome along to another episode of Scarred for Life, a journey into the dark dystopian pop culture of the 1970s, 80s and beyond. I'm joined as ever by Steve Brotherstone and David Lawrence, co-authors of the Scary as Hell Scarred for Life books. Go get them now. Every week we'll be speaking to a special guest who'll be bringing with them 3 horrific childhood memories of something that has literally terrified them since childhood. Before we say hello to this week's guest, we've got a hell of a guest for you. Very quickly, let's just look at one of your scars, a listener's scar. You guys have got in touch with stuff that's freaked you out when you were kids. Hi to Lee Rand, who's got in touch. Contact at scarredforlifebooks.com. It says, guys, The Enchanted Castle, 1979 production from the most spine-chilling organisation, the BBC. I was 4 when this was shown, and it has haunted me ever since. The Ugly Wugglies. Here's an extract from Wikipedia. Guy Fawkes-style dummies that they made to swell the audience numbers at one of their play performances come to life. Horrible. Actors with terrifying masks on. Thanks, BBC. Love the books and the podcast, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lee. Amazing message. You guys got any memories of the Ugly Wugglies at all? Either of you two?
Yes. Actually, Enchanted Castle is actually horrible because these Ugly Wugglies are brought to life. And the thing that scares me the most is the kids, because the kids lure the Ugly Wugglies out into the garden, into like a crypt, and entomb them forever in the crypt.
Oh my!
And
bloody hell!
It's yeah. So the scariest thing is not the Ugly Wugglies; it's the children.
Amazing. Well, we love hearing your scars. Do keep getting in touch with those. They're brilliant. But our next guest, let's get them on, is an award-winning actor, writer, producer, director and magician. His much-feted career began with the groundbreaking League of Gentlemen, which won a British Academy Television Award, a Royal Television Society Award and the Golden Rose of Montreux. He's also appeared in shows as diverse as Doctor Who, Peter Kay's Car Share and The Great British Bake Off. He's no stranger to stage and film, appearing in horror films such as A Field in England and Borley Rectory, and on stage had leading roles in The Producers, Absent Friends and many more. As a writer, he co-created Inside No.9 and Psychoville. A man of many talents we could be here all day with this. So let's just introduce the very talented Reece Shearsmith and say welcome to Scarred for Life. Reece Shearsmith, it's a real honour to welcome you to Scarred for Life. And the thing that we just can't get over, staring on this video chat as we are, is what an amazing loft or attic you have. Have you ever been complimented on the attic before, Reece?
I have had people comment on it. Yeah, it is a sort of my safe space where I creep into, and all my horrors are all tucked away up here behind a door. The door is actually a bookshelf, so once I'm in, it looks like I've gone, and then you can't get in, and you press a button, and then the door opens, so I can get away from it.
Wow!
I vanish. It's like
that's amazing.
Panic room.
It's a panic. It's just like an elaborate panic room.
But with all nice, well, all mine, I think they're nice. But yeah, some people might think they're all a bit strange. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. I mean, just talk us through some of the things we can see in the background. Now, I've always wondered this when someone like yourself is in TV and film. Are you allowed to kind of take mementos of things from things?
I took lots of things from productions over the years. Just little items and some massive things. There's a huge head right there, which you can't see, from Psychoville, which was a big Mr. Punch head. There's the little Mr. Punch is on there. That's Bela Lugosi. That's Slappy peeping out from behind the zigzag lady. That is the homunculus from the League of Gentlemen, which I've captured. There's Fat from the film Magic, Anthony Hopkins model.
Wow.
The cabinet full of magic tricks. That's a painting that Mark did that was on the Demeter when he did his Dracula. And it's of Christopher Lee. And then we've got Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing and Vincent Price up there, as well as Houdini. So lots of little people.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Dave, how are you doing there? Because obviously one of the first episodes we did, Dave shared his quite triggering fear of ventriloquist dummies, and there's a few in shot, as we can see there.
Yes, I'm quite disturbed by the Anthony Hopkins story from Magic. Yeah, I'll be honest. Although I don't think it looks quite as evil as Mr. Paul Anshin. I'll be honest with you.
That's true. We've got here. This is one of the.
Oh my!
No, that's worse.
God,
that's much worse. That is much worse.
This is Chloe O'Radcliffe from the first League of Gentlemen tour that we did.
Wow!
Range of it. We had it in. She was in a singing and dancing routine. So I kept her.
She's a delight.
It's like Cat's Eyes. It's horrid.
It's like Rosie and Jim, the kids' TV show, has gone horribly wrong.
Exactly. Rosie and Jim inspired, very much so, yeah.
So Reece, have you always been drawn to the unusual, even from a young age, would you say?
Yes, I think I was safe to say that I was a monster kid, as John Landis would call me. And I, like a lot of us, was inside reading Edgar Allan Poe, Stephen King, whilst with the curtains drawn, whilst everyone was playing outside. My mum and dad would come and say, "They're all knocking for you. Go outside and play." And I'm like, "No." So I was often to be found making, strange early forays into Mike Flanagan territory, making the removable floorboards from the Telltale House and putting a body underneath it when I was about 10.
Wow.
So things like that. I wrote to Stephen King, and he wrote back to me. He was just about to write Christine, but he was very nice. He was very encouraging about, because I said, I don't know what I wrote, I don't know what I said to him, but he told me he was writing one about a haunted car, and that transpired to be Christine. So it's amazing to get a little postcard from a man that I thought, how could he possibly, for this brief moment in time, he took time out of his day to write back to me, and it was very moving. It was great. And I got Peter Cushing wrote to me, Christopher Lee wrote to me. So, and I eventually met Christopher Lee. I couldn't believe it. So that was a real, pinch yourself, going to lunch with Christopher Lee at the behest of John Landis, who is now my friend. I mean, you'd never quite believe this life that I've cut into. It's an amazing privileged position that I've got to meet a lot of people that I've admired, and my life now is really emulating and trying to dig into the things that used to scare me, and our telly is all the stuff that we loved, hopefully not ripped off, but certainly inspired by, and I think we try to make the same kind of telly, and it's great. And I do sort of pinch myself every day that I'm still living an adult life, but really I'm still completely immersed, as you can see, in being 15.
And then if you're in the business of scaring, like you are, is it harder to be scared yourself when you kind of think you're approaching it from almost a professional angle? I see what they've done there, I like what they've done there. That's a unique mechanism. Is it harder to scare you now than it used to be, Reece?
I think I've certainly got more squeamish. I watched Talk to Me Through My Fingers the other week when I went to see it, and it was like, it's so horrible. And the Saw films and so a lot of the torture type of films I can't bear watching, really. That they might be good, and I know a lot of Fright Fest, they cheer all the gore, but I'm sort of like, I don't like really to see it now. But to scare people, yes. I mean, I'm fascinated by the mechanics of horror films and how they work, and how certain things will work and how things are overused. I went to see The Exorcist, the new one, and I thought it was fine, but it suffered from being a collection of so many things that we've seen so many times before, and it was like I admired the fact that it was sort of trying to do the same again, and it had that feeling of the original, and the editing and the savage editing of some of the moments. But I just thought it suffers from the fact that we've seen it so many times, and yet, of course, many horror films, run-of-the-mill horror films, are made up of your classic nuts and bolts jump scares, which you sort of see coming a mile off, but they sort of work in a way, and if they surprise you. I'm always fascinated by when something new comes along, and for whatever reason, it makes my skin crawl, or it does make me jump, and I think, what's done that? What is it about the way that's been filmed that's so creepy? And there were a few things like that in the recent Conjuring films that were very well put together, some of them, and there was, I think, the second Conjuring, when the first sighting of the nun comes along from down the corridor. It was a really first encounter with her. And I think, again, that comes from that David Lynch thing of things being far away, and you can't quite make out what it is in the shadows, and the sound in that had a lot to do with it as well. But it's interesting when you're in a horror type situation filming one, because it's not scary. And when I took over Andy Nyman, who I know you've had on the podcast, doing ghost stories, I was terrified watching that. And then I was in it. I played his part as Mr. Goodman for 3 months in the West End, and it was like, it wasn't scary anymore. It was sort of the being backstage of it, seeing the running of it was great. But it was a lovely thing to be at the helm of the scares. But suddenly, I didn't suddenly feel that spell had been broken because I was looking behind the curtain.
Dave.
I think scares for me are mostly psychological. I watched a film once, I can't remember which one it was, and it was absolutely terrifying up to the point where you saw the monster, saw the ghost, whatever it was. And I think the psychology of horror works on me far better than, for example, gore. I don't think gore does anything for me. It's like a sex scene. It's like I don't need that bit. I could have the psychology of it up to that point, and then just cut away. I think psychology is far more important. So it's the anticipation of the scare that's more scary than the jump itself. The jump itself just annoys me.
Right. Yeah. And I get what you mean. I mean, it does. Some of the more deeply disturbing books that I've read of Stephen King, for example, like the Pet Sematary is such a horrible, and The Shining, in fact, the original book of The Shining is it's moving and it's horrible because there's peril with the main character and the psychology of what they're really about, with Pet Sematary being about a study of grief, really, of when the boy dies. It's horrible. And then Jack Torrance tussling with this demon that is alcoholism, and the manifestation of that through the hotel, and how that becomes this big monster that takes over him. And the tragedy of the book of The Shining is that you really get the sense that it's not Jack Torrance at all that's doing it. It is the Overlook, and it's the ghosts of that are overtaking him. And so it's tragic. I remember the ending when he's smashing his own head in, and the Overlook's about to blow because he's forgotten to turn off the boiler. And you get and I think that he writes that there's a glimpse back of Jack in there, and it's heartbreaking because you think, yes, it's not him. It's not just he's gone mad, which is a little bit what people's criticism of the film of The Shining is, that Jack Nicholson is mad from the start. But he's great, and I love the film, and I wouldn't ever take away from what's good about that depiction of it. I know Stephen King didn't like it, but both work. And I think, the psychology of getting into the character and feeling for the character, and then having things happen to that character where it begins to matter, doesn't it? And then the stakes are raised, and you care. And then as soon as you care, you're invested, and the whole story will come to life and work.
That was the thing that we've just been talking about, the whole gore versus psychological versus making your skin crawl. Think about horror. And I've been obsessed with horror since I was about 3. And I went through every phase. In my teenage years, I was a teenager slap bang in the video nasty era. So it was all about gore for me. And now I'm like you, Reece, I can't stand it. I watched Midsummer over 2 nights because there's a scene in it, an image in it that knocked me sick to the point where I switched it off and thought, I've got to come back to this tomorrow and just watch Michael Benty's Potty Time or something to take the taste out of my mouth. But it's the little things, it's the psychology. I know it's a film that was very divisive at the time, was the first Paranormal Activity. And loads of younger people I knew, because I used to work in Forbidden Planet, most of the customers said it was just boring, rubbish. Where's the scares? There's a scene in it where a door opens by itself, and I remember clutching like the chair I was in, because that can happen.
Yeah.
But Freddy Krueger's never going to happen to me, so why should I be scared of Freddy Krueger? So it's the thing that I remember watching The League of Gentlemen for the first time with an ex-girlfriend of mine in 1999. She loved it, we both loved it, but I got something else out of it that she didn't. I've watched the first episode and thought, these guys grew up with Amicus. These guys grew up with Shiver and Shake and Monster Fun. These guys grew up with public information films, and I just felt like it was the same childhood that I'd had, that you'd had, which obviously now we know you had. So it's the first thing I remember seeing that tapped into what we now call the Scarred for Life era.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we drew on so much of it, and it is all our collective childhoods and yours, undoubtedly. And it was just all that stuff that was taken for granted when we grew up, and it was all so dark and so matter of fact as well. I think that's the thing. It was mundane, and it wasn't gothic. That's why all the the TV Hammer House horrors were always so more, and Amicus actually, than Hammer, because Hammer was gothic and sort of once removed because it was in castles, and you didn't. But then the housing estates that a lot of Hammer House horror were in Great Missenden places, it felt very real, and that's why that Stephen King always talks about the ghost in the radiator being far more scary than the monster in the castle or whatever it might be, because it like you say, it could happen. Your house is where things get you, which is why a lot of the times home invasion story films and stories are horrible, because that absolutely taps into that worst fear.
Yeah.
I remember Andy Nyman in the very first bits of ghost stories, he talks about what actually scares you as the Professor Goodman, and he says it's death and dying, but it's also that creak in the middle of the night on the stairs. And it's the and I've always wanted to write something about just sitting in the bed when you're in your bed and thinking someone's in the house. And you can't get more frightened than that. It's absolutely terrifying. And that feeling of as a kid having that and wanting to scurry into mum and dad's bedroom and just wake them up and just say, "Will you check downstairs? I've heard a noise." Never more scared than that. I mean, most horror films, let's face it, I don't think you're ever that scared. So when one actually does work, it's extraordinary. It's a brilliant sort of thrilling feeling, but also terrifying because you rarely have it. So when actually something does unnerve you, it's a really unsettling, as it's meant to be, but it's more unsettling because it never normally happens, I think. So something that does that is to be cherished, I think.
You have a superb talent for playing unsettling characters, Reece. What do you think that is? Where does that come from? And can you kind of define what it is that makes you so good at portraying characters like that where you're not quite sure?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I've often, I mean, some of the comedic ones I've played have often, the comedy engine of them is that they are very angry all the time. I play the persona of Reece often that I'm really angry. I'm not really. That's another act, really. The truth is, I am very content with my life and very happy. But it's always funny in things to turn up the dial of being disproportionately rageful, and I've done that in a lot of my characters as well. And I think, and then sometimes when I've played more sinister characters, then it's the Lecter stillness and that sort of detached, switched offness that can sometimes settle, and or the unpredictability of a person. There was never, I mean, one of the Scarred for Life's choices that I dismissed, and that's because I thought no one knows this person, but it was the PE teacher, the terrifying, unpredictable nature of and we all had a teacher probably that was sort of, on the one hand, you didn't know what you're going to get. They were like psychotic. They'd be great and your friend and lovely, and then other days a different person and terrifying for it. And it's like you were on absolute eggshells because you thought, which one am I going to get? And that feeling at school was also another one of these things that just, as in the modern parlance, is triggering.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to be like. It's terrifying to think I'm going to be on the receiving end of it. And the betrayal of when the teachers liked you, or you thought you got on with a certain teacher, and then they're really horrible to you one day. So wounding and terrifying, hurtful, because you think, I thought he liked me. I was in the good books. But then all bets are off, of course. And they probably did it to pass up, like, don't think you're my friend. I'm not your friend.
Keep you on your toes.
Yes.
I mean, another previous guest, Jeremy Dyson, was just telling us how League of Gentlemen was such a democratic process and how well you guys all worked together. I mean, it did sound like, I interview a lot of bands and so on with the radio show, and they always end up kind of falling out in the end, or one of them turns into a big head and doesn't want the others involved anymore. But you guys have kind of, I don't know, you've kind of navigated through this relationship and such success without anyone falling out or anyone trying to start their own band, to use that kind of phrase. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we did, because it was going all right. I think had it been failing, or we were finding it hard, or it wasn't working out and we weren't getting anywhere, it would have been more fractious maybe. But because it was every step of the way, it was like, oh, this is where we went to Edinburgh and we did the shows. And I remember being sort of, I don't feel that we had a master plan, but we were all wanted to do it. We enjoyed doing it, but I don't think we thought ahead to the 10 years that it would take of our lives, where we would go to Edinburgh and we would get a radio show and then we would do a TV show. It was just each step of the way we were in it, doing it and enjoying doing it, and it was working. And people that weren't our friends came to see it in Edinburgh, and that was it was so like a valediction of us actually it being funny in its own right and not just polite friends coming again and again. And we were very careful, I think, because there were 4 of us submitting writing, to make sure that everyone got a bit of it. Everyone had to have a quarter of Royston Vasey, and we all had to have a share of that collective world. So because there were what felt like quite a lot of us, and it was the hardest part of the league really was the day sitting down with all the material and going, right, how do we pool it all together and make a story? Of course, there wasn't really a story. It was just collective sketches, but we had an overarching thing that made it feel like you were flitting around a town. But yeah, we were overly careful, I think, to not upset, because it's nothing. You can't play, you can't feel funny if there's any awkward feeling in the room. So it was to be absolutely actively avoided, to nurture it and be very careful about that.
I mean, League of Gentlemen, hugely successful. Inside No.9 has taken that to the next level. Is it 9 series so far? How many series have you guys done on Inside No.9?
We've done 8 series, and we are just now in the start of pre-production for the 9th and final series. So we thought we would get to 9 in there. I mean, we thought we'd do 1, and we never knew it would get constantly recommissioned. And yet, and I have another 10 years of my life taken up doing this one thing. I mean, it's not one. By the end, we'll have done 55 different stories.
Wow. Does that make it harder to write because you've explored so many different areas and ways of doing it? Because it's very versatile. You try different stuff and do different things. The ground must be harder to find new avenues these days.
Yeah. What do you think? Of course, absolutely devastating.
That's a good point.
Tyranny of using up a lifetime of ideas, because we know the nuts and bolts of each episode and what they draw on and what they do and the sort of mechanics of the twists and everything and the storytelling. So it does get hard to think genuinely, have we done that before and done it better elsewhere? If we come up with an idea, we think, oh, that's quite good. And then we go, it's a bit like that one. We've done it already, really. So the bar, as far as we being creators of it and not wanting to repeat ourselves, which we've always tried to not do, is hard. Yeah. So, we're going to get to 9, filming 9 the end of this year and the start of next year. And that will be, I think, it for Inside No.9. But, it was a long run at an anthology series where we're in a world where they don't do them. So we were so delighted that they wanted to bring such a thing back into the world.
What do you think is the scariest episode that you guys have done on Inside No.9? My personal favourite, Sardines and 12 Days of Christine. What would you say is the scariest one of the lot?
That's hard. I think some people found Cold Comfort quite scary, and that was interesting because that was the one in the helpline, which was all the cameras, just fixed cameras, and it was like a Zoom meeting, and you could see various cameras fixed, and what was scary was the sort of leaning in, not knowing, in that way where you're watching found footage and or watch this ghost appear and you're watching on YouTube this clip and you think, when is it coming? I can't see anything. What am I meant to see? What am I looking at? And the dread and the anticipation of just looking at a screen, like the Paranormal Activities, that are just nothing, and then a door will open or the bed sheets will get pulled back. It's that leaning in, waiting for the scare, which is like a reverse engineering of a jump scare in a way, because you sort of and because the playing field is so mundane and flat. And I think that was what was great about that first Paranormal Activity. It really felt like you were in the real world. But that was a scary one. I think some of the darker ones that people have picked up on have been the more mundane, again, not the gothic-y ones. We've done ones like the Harrowing, which was set with me and Helen McCrory's sort of weird vampiric brother and sister, and that was very gothic, and it felt like the Munsters in a way, and it was more overt ghost trainy horror. But then we've done more psychological, nasty ones, like the one that we did called To Have a Hole, where Steve had a woman in the basement, and it was really horrible because it was very ordinary and dreary. Like, it appeared to be about a dreary marriage, and yet all the while he had this terrible dark secret literally underneath the house, and that was a very dark one. And I don't know whether it was scary. It was sort of scary when you knew the reality of him being such a cold reptilian monster. But the fun has been exploring and being allowed to so many different types of storytelling and how to tell a story on telly. We've used the medium of television as much as we could in without ever trying, I hope that it hasn't felt like it's gimmick of the week. We've always wanted to do it with the intention, the reason behind it being a valid reason. Like when we did the silent episode, in series 1, A Quiet Night In, we were robbing the house. So it was like a silent comedy, but there was a reason why we weren't talking. So it was like there was a valid reason within it to allow the mechanics of the story to work.
I was going to say the great thing I love about Inside No.9 and Black Mirror is that I grew up in the golden age of the great British anthology. We were swamped with them. It was obviously Tales of the Unexpected and Hammer House of Horror, thriller, armchair thriller, Shadows of Fear, one of the forgotten ones, which is just stunning.
The Night Gallery.
And I thought, Night Gallery, the Frightened
Scorpion Tales.
I thought, Scorpion, there's so many of them. I thought when Black Mirror became big, but when Inside No.9 exploded the way it did for BBC Two, I thought the way things tend to work is another channel, another kind of streaming service, whatever, wants their own little slice of the pie. But it feels more like you guys and Charlie Brooker are just left to your own devices. But the anthology show never came back, and I was kind of quite sad about that, because I understand you need new sets, new cast.
Yeah.
You've got to write a whole new story. But I do miss those
Absolutely.
complete in one episode things.
It's strange that there isn't more of them. I think it's because it's hard. They're hard to do, good ones, and part of the fun of it is the you wouldn't want to be accused of it if you're the writer of it, but the hit and miss nature of what appeals to you week in, week out, and that you don't know what you're going to get. It is like a bag of revels. And I met up with Charlie and we had a meal, and it was like a support group for people that write anthologies now. We just moaned how hard it was.
Anthologist Anonymous.
Yes, yeah. And it was great. It was lovely to spot war stories about how hard it is to do. But maybe that's why it is. When I guess if you've got teams and teams of writers, that's one way of getting through it. But it's just been me and Steve in a room for 10 years doing all these stories, and that's given it tonally a thing, because and we're in them, of course, and that gives it a continuity. Yeah. But I think we are proud of it, and the very fact that we've got this far in with, and I don't think that there'll be people that say they should have stopped at series 2, but we're still very happy with the amount of invention that we're still injecting into them, and I think that we would have stopped if we thought, no, we really can't keep it up, So, but the opportunity is lovely to each week have a clean slate. That's the tyranny, of course, because you're then left with, how do you do it again the next week? But one of the good things about it is you can have these great highs and people can die and there's extraordinary endings. In the world of 6 half hours about the same thing, everything has to reset, of course, and you're back to square one. You can't really have these huge main characters dying on these things, twisting on their heads or whatever. So, I think if we ever do anything else after this, which I hope we will, it'll be an interesting exercise to do longer storytelling, because we've done 28 and a half minutes for 10 years. So it'd be nice to try to flex our muscles and do something that, is on a bit longer in the way it tells its story, and a bit more like a big narrative, like we did with Psychoville. That was really a reaction to doing The League for so many years. It was sketches, and then we thought, let's do an ongoing story. And that was what that was. And then we went back to Play for Today's, really. That's what the number 9s are.
So one more quick question before we get to your scars, Reece. In terms of the way you and Steve write, do you meet up at a service station and chat, or do you meet at a cafe, or is it all emailing? How do you guys write together?
We have a little office in nearby, like 5 minutes from each of us, in Muswell Hill in North London, and we go there and we write 9 to 5. And sometimes by 2 o'clock, we're sick of it, and we just think it's not working today, let's forget it. So, and we've done that right before Psychoville. We've had it for years. It's very much front room, nothing in it, just a table and Steve's laptop on it, and there's not even a kettle in it. It is so plain.
Bloody hell.
And we'll go out for lunch, often to the same place, and sometimes things will happen during the lunch that we will think, could that be a number 9? And sometimes things have happened, and they have transpired and have made their way after lots of talking into a storyline. But that's the key, I think, a lot of talking. We really we'll have read something or something about, Steve literally one day was walking to the office and he saw a black shoe on the floor. And he brought me back out of the office to go and look at it. And he said, look how weirdly how it's just placed on the floor like that. What's the story behind that? And then we thought, could that be a story? And we began just talking. Amazing. And made it into a story. And other times we'll have what we think is a good ending and think, how do we get there? What could that be? Other times we've got a great ending, and as we get there, we think that's becoming too obvious an ending, we've got to change it. So we're always trying to work out just the best intriguing story, and how what you think you're watching ends up not what you're watching. And every few minutes you're leaning into it because it's taking you on a journey that you never thought you were going to go on. And just to try and keep you hooked. So much telly it's just on in the background, and you just don't care, and you go and make a sandwich and come back and they'll tell you what's happened in the last 5 minutes because there'll be a recap, because that's what telly's like. And we just want for you, you're required to stay and watch it and spend a bit more attention on our things. And that's not for everyone, I'm not saying all telly should be that, but ours is. And I really like it that they did a study and they showed us it about people on Twitter whilst our program was on. Most programs, in fact, they put them in the corner, hashtag talk about our program whilst it's on. And ours, it flatlined whilst they watched it. And then at the end, it spiked and they all went back on it. So they were watching it. Imagine that.
Actually watching it.
It's amazing.
Talking about something afterwards, like we used to.
Yeah, like they used to do, exactly, yeah. So we were very proud of that. We thought, we've grabbed their attention in this world where you simply can't, and it's not geared up to anymore, There was talk a few years back of having a special chair in the theatre where you could tweet from it. I mean, what world are we in?
Awful.
Oh, God.
It's awful, isn't it?
I know.
Oh, God.
Absolutely. Terrible.
Well, let's get down to it then, Reece. This podcast works in that you bring 3 things with you that have scarred you for life. Could we please get your first scar, Reece?
Yes. Well, I mean, God, it's so hard to do, isn't it? There were so many. Can I tell you some of the ones I dismissed?
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Here's some that never made it.
Some that never made it. Mr. Blobby's Feet.
Sounds like a band.
I know. But Mr. Blobby on Nell's house party had the most horrible, dirty, mucky black feet, and that absolutely scarred me for life. And so I didn't pick him. The other one was Frank Spencer's neighbour in Some Mothers Do Have Them. He had a name. I went and looked who it was. It was played by Glyn Edwards, and he was Mr. Lewis for many years in. He was Mr. Spencer, and his rage against Frank used to absolutely kill me. It was like, again, it was that school teacher thing of, please don't tell him off, please don't tell him off. So whenever he was getting into these scrapes, this man would be his absolute blood boiling. Maybe it's where I got my characters from, but that being on the receiving end of it, my blood run cold. So anyway, there were 2 that I didn't pick. But my first one, in no particular order, is I was always a big fan of the 2 Ronnies. And one night on the 2 Ronnies, and it's not Phantom Raspberry Blower, which of course was brilliant, but there was one of their musical numbers. It came on. I think they did various sketches, and then the last bit, and it was Sweeney Todd, but it was Teeny Todd. It was called Teeny Todd, and Ronnie Corbett was Sweeney, but he was called Teeny because he was little, and he had shock of ginger hair, and Ronnie Barker was Mrs. Lovett in drag, and it was the most grisly thing I've ever seen. I just remember watching this thing. I loved it because I was all into horror, and it began with like bats and mist. But then it became really, really horrible because the cutting of the throats was like Tim Burton. And it was on like 6:15.
Bloody hell.
Literally cutting throats and going down this trapdoor into the thing and making the pies, and it was the whole story, but done with 2 Ronnies doing it.
I learned from a barber called Slacker. He shaved with high speed and a leer. First lesson was, what's this here, razor? The second was, where's that there ear? Oh!
It was such a strange thing. And then I remember it absolutely locking, it was burned into my memory. And then I remember waiting however long it was for a repeat, because of course this is before you could record anything. And it came on again. I remember it must have been a year or two later when it was on the repeat of this series, and it went on and on, week after week. I was thinking, this definitely is the series that's got Teeny Todd in it. And it got to the point where there was only one left, and I thought, well, this has to be it. And it got to the point where it should have been Teeny Todd, and it was a Top of the Pops skit that they did, and they'd swapped it out. Obviously too grisly for telly, and I've never seen it since.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So it's not on DVD. It's not like
you can't find it on you. You know, normally 30 seconds. If you can't remember anything, look on YouTube. You'll have the answer. You'll see it again after maybe 20 seconds of looking. This I can't.
Do you think that do you think the key to the scare with this, Reece, is, you know, sometimes when you have people, we were just talking earlier on about trusting and never know where you are with the teacher, and they might turn or whatever, but like having someone that you used to for comedy or japes suddenly turning. I mean, do you remember when Matthew Kelly from Stars in Their Eyes did he was a murderer in a drama, and he was it was terrifying because you're just used to him being tonight, Matthew, I'm going to be, and then the next thing you know, he was this kind of cold killer, and it's like something about maybe when you go from which is something that Inside No.9, everything that you guys do works brilliantly, is that kind of fine balance between comedic and really unsettling, and you don't know where you are with something. There's something in that maybe.
Yeah, I mean it pushes all the buttons of all the things that in the sort of ingredients of the things we do now is at the forefront, with the fact that we've we do. It was a comedy horror sketch really, but what was very surprising about it was how grisly it was, how gory it was, and how sinister Ronnie Corbett especially was, with his shock of hair and his white pasty face, just doing a horror thing. And it was like, yes, I shouldn't be seeing it. I love that he's doing it, but it's also really a hard watch. So that was my.
Is it on the DVD? It's on the DVDs, do you think? So I've got the entire series on DVD.
You probably ought to find it instantly, Dave.
I'm going to get the DVDs out. I'm going to watch every single one.
Dave, if you find that, there must be a way of ripping the video.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah, I've got the whole
make it into a file.
I'd love to see it.
Amazing.
Be traumatized all over again, Reece. What about that? I was going to ask you actually, what, obviously part of what big part of what you do is comedy. What we talked about, the kind of scary stuff that you were watching when you were growing up. What comedy wise, did you watch? Was in your formative years had a big effect on you?
Well, I don't know about form. I mean, I remember always admiring and liking the actors, the great comedy actors like Ronnie Barker and Ronnie Corbett. I mean, I thought Corbett was always very good, and I loved Leonard Rossiter in Rising Damp, and Reggie Perrin, and Victoria Ward and Alan Bennett. And it was a lot of the plays as well that I would see and think, oh, they're sort of different. They're darker and they're a cut above, but they resonated with me because there were a lot of northern voices in there, and it timed with me as being authentic, So, and Peter Sellers, huge fan of him and his oeuvre and the work, Kubrick, film-wise, but a real mix, but also just all the stuff that was on. We never had much choice, did we? There was three sides. It was a Low and Heidi High as well in the mix of all that. But the things I sort of were drawn to were the more sort of characterful stuff that I felt like was, and the wordplay of some sketches as well. A lot of David Wennick's sketches that he would write for the Rons, I used to enjoy and think, oh, that's so clever. How are they doing that? And I would sometimes, I remember recording sometimes the audio of them, like people did with the Pythons. But I was a bit too young for telly Python. I knew Python from the films more, but then I went back obviously and consumed it all. But yeah, that and the Goons as well, Spike Milligan. I was too young for QC, but I used to try and find those. So a lot of the traditional stuff, but yeah, mostly I think the sort of the comedy actors, because I never thought I would could be an actor. I was always more into drawing and art when I was little, and that was what I was going to do. But slowly over time, it was the thing that I kept going back to and thinking that. And then I eventually had the crossroads of whether it should be art or drama school, and I picked Bretton Hall, which is a drama degree, because I thought, well, I can't do it. I might be able to teach it, become one of those horrible teachers that I'm talking about. So it was just the normal sort of set of comedy people that you would see back in the day. Little and large.
Little and large, yeah. I mean, you were just saying earlier on about the fact that it was on at 6:15, and this is a running theme with the Scarred for Life books, is that there was stuff that was on when kids were watching TV back then that was absolutely terrifying, and it's kind of less so now. Do you think kids are scared enough as much as they should be these days, Reece?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know what world we're in anymore, to be honest, because you can see everything that you shouldn't ever see in, like I say, in 15 seconds. You can see something that you should never have seen in your entire life, and by accident. And so the world that we inhabited, it did feel like it was harder to accidentally see terrible things, but equally it's also counterbalanced by the fact that it was all just on primetime television, all the threads and all the terrors that we were just given because we were living in the age of, you're going to be in a nuclear war any minute, which is the big way of living in the 70s and 80s, was how to take your bodies out. I mean, obviously you've got all this in this, but that in itself, and the air raid sirens, and the fact you can go out your house and get electrocuted any corner with these bollards, and it was a terrifying world we live in. I mean, and I don't know whether, because they're grown up now, but when my kids were little, I always remember Mark saying, because I would say, oh, I was quite Victorian, I wouldn't let them see anything. And he said, it won't be, you can try all you like to stop them seeing horrible things, but it'll be something totally innocuous that they're left with that scars them for life. Like Mark it was a picture of Jesus on the cross, his eyes raised up. It was just in a church, and it haunted him, terrified him, the one in Carrie. And it's you're allowed to see it. It's a picture, it's a painting, but the haunting image of these eyes of this Jesus Christ with the blood in his hands is the thing that Mark's takeaway of, like, can't bear looking at it. And there's the odd little, there's the odd depiction in Usborne Book of Ghosts or somewhere where it's not even the ghostly apparition that's painted, it's some other weird little thing. I was terrified of Geth, or I call it Geth, it's Jeff the talking mongoose. And there's a little picture of that with its claws through the crack in the wall. But that, I cannot even look at it now. Terrified.
Yeah, sorry, talking about kids being terrified, I don't think they are. I think they're desensitized, because I teach kids maths, and this kid said to me one day, he said, oh, you got to see this video on the internet. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it was and Steve knows what this is. It's a Mexican drug cartel execution video where these two guys get the heads chainsawed off.
No.
Yeah, and the chainsaw gets stuck. It breaks down. It's halfway through the second guy's neck. I couldn't get it out of my head for 3 days. 3 days.
It'd be 3 months for me.
Yeah,
that's
it was
awful.
But they thought it was funny.
My God.
And I think, as you said, 15 seconds. You can see. I mean, on Twitter, or X as it is now, the Twitter channels, whatever, the accounts that follow the Ukraine war, and you'll see pictures of soldiers being blown up. I mean, and you can see terrible real things. But I think our childhoods, again, getting back to the psychology, were far more psychological scares. The effects, especially effects, weren't there to truly horrify you, I don't think. But it still wormed its way into your psyche, I think. So.
The imagination took over, though, Dave. It was,
absolutely. Yeah.
It was. We filled in the blanks ourselves, even though there was big CSO lines around people's bodies, but I just bought into it all. Which
reminds me of another story I've told before. I distinctly remember watching the Seeds of Doom, where Harrison Chase falls into the compost make at the end. And I remember the screams and the blood and the sound of shattering bones. None of that is there.
Right.
All of that was just in my mind.
Yeah.
So I think, our minds filled in a lot of horror for us.
Yeah. And I think a lot of children's telly was very sophisticated. And all the Nigel Neal stuff, it's all off camera and talked about, and it's very literary, and you've got to sort of really fill in the blanks. And that, of course, is the stuff of M.R. James, where it's the dread and the creeping up on you of the thing that stays in your head because you've painted all the pictures, and it isn't sort of blown by seeing it. It's sort of left to you to think, what's this thing around the corner. I was just thinking today, watching the Phantom of the Opera, how quickly they show in the musical. I went to see the Phantom of the Opera today. how quickly they show the Phantom. He's singing the Phantom of the Opera and taking her down on the gondola within about 10 minutes. And I thought, this is enough. You keep him back. Don't see him for ages.
It's not Aliens, is it?
Talking, it's not Aliens.
Yeah.
I thought, he was shown the shark straight away with a half mask on and a rose. And you've got to keep him back. And then he would have had it'd be much more creepier, I think. But of course, people want to see him straight away. But although that's his first mistake, he shouldn't even be in the first half. I'd keep him back.
But hang on, you pay to see Phantom of the Opera. You want to see the Phantom, and also probably an opera as well.
Yeah,
you want those things. You pay for that.
So that's what you get. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, then, Reece, let's have your second scar, please, if we could.
Yeah, my second scar, not unsurprisingly, probably is Wurzel Gummidge and his handsome head. So his handsome head,
absolutely,
which
fantastic.
is obviously you all know it, but I interestingly I remembered it and thought, well, it's got to be that. And I thought it was Posh Head. I thought it was called Posh Head, and I went and I looked, and he's called Handsome Head. And so, of course, Wurzel had all these different heads. I mean, that was always a delight to me to see him swapping heads, just because it was like it just fell into the world of slightly ghoulish horror-like situation. And of course, it all is really disturbing. Wurzel Gummidge, it's violent. There's so much in it that's like zombie apocalypse. I mean, the trial of Wurzel Gummidge, of course, is one of the most terrible things you've ever seen, when all these scarecrows come alive and are all walking sluggishly across the countryside to go and put him on trial. But the Posh Head,
I've just seen it now for the first time.
It's great,
I've
isn't it?
seen it like, oh my god,
horrible. It's Wurzel with, so he's got this flat parted hair down the middle, and he's got white teeth that are like orange peel but white, and he's got a monocle, and it's just absolutely terrible. And for some reason, Wurzel wants to have a handsome head. I think he thinks he can get attract the ladies with it, and then the Crowman makes him this handsome head, and he turns up at the house of Joan Sim to have tea, and she doesn't really know why he's there, but she goes, "Who on earth are you?" And he says, I think it's something like, "I'm a scarecrow man, and I've come for my tea and cake." And it's just like, that's horrible in itself. I'm a scarecrow man. Anyway, so she lets him in, and he sits down, just sort of makes himself at home. And then for some reason, Mr. Peters, who's also living there, makes him try to, I think he wants him to plug a light in, but he won't touch the electric wire because he's terrified of the electric. Can't touch electric. No, I don't like electric. And he won't touch the electric because he thinks he's going to be set on fire. And that's horrible as well. And then he's sort of blown up. Joan Sims is there as well, as she falls off the mattress. And so then that's the first encounter. And then the even worse is the second time he walks out with his handsome head, and he goes up to this, what is like a depiction of like a crone. She's a scarecrow in a field, and he wants to woo her. And she wakes up, and he's got the Posh Head on. And she just cackles in his face in that really cruel way that Aunt Sally used to be horrible to him, but this is even worse. And then she's cackling and laughing at him like, "No way in a million years I'm going to go out with you with that stupid head on." And she starts beating him literally to pieces. And his arms and legs fly out of the corner, and his head flies off. And she's crying with laughter and cackling like a witch. And it's, again, 6:15, children's television.
Dave.
Yeah, we were in Liverpool. We did a live show in Liverpool, and we had a picture on screen of Daft Head.
Right.
And that got a visceral reaction from a lady in the front row. I think, she couldn't look at it. She could not look at Daft Head.
Covered her face. We had to take it off.
Yeah, it's just so. Yeah, it's horrific. And I always worried about his sentience. If he took his head off, why didn't his body just collapse on the floor? I used to think about things like that.
Yeah.
To think about the horror elements of Wurzel Gummidge, we were talking about them, because it is pure folk horror at times. I don't know if you remember, Reece, but you probably will. The first episode, when he comes to life properly for the first time, and it's pouring with rain, there's crows cawing, and there's mud that's caked on his face, but it gets washed away by the rain. I took that clip, took the audio off and put it on my Twitter, replaced by the soundtrack to Zombie Flesh Eaters. But I had people underneath going, I don't remember the music being this. Because they just took it on face value because it looks like a horror film.
Absolutely, it is. It's complete horror. They know what they were doing. It can't be by accident that some of the depictions. So it's too specific. You know what filming is like. Nothing is sort of by accident. So it's a choice, definitely. And it is proper folk horror. You're right. There is so scary bits in it, and then sort of undercut with the sweetness of Wurzel. But yeah, there is a darkness to it all. I think that's just sort of pervading in the world that it creates, and also the strange decision that they make about their heads when they come off. They're no longer like him. They're much more rudimentary versions. And I remember always being slightly disturbed by that. Like, why has it changed? It's like some magic happens, but the rules of it are just that's what happens. It becomes a sort of simpler head. But yeah, posh head. I'm going to call it posh head. I prefer it to handsome head.
That first episode, though, is a horror film. It's the car's going down a country lane and the kid wants to pee, so he gets out and goes into that is the start of a horror film.
It's like
the
episode of Amber House of Horror with the man in the yellow Mac.
Yes, it is. You're right.
Yeah. Do you remember the end, the very ending to the first episode of the whole first episode has a completely different tone because it ends with the two kids jumping over the turnstile and they're coming to see Wurzel. And I think one of them, the little girl, says that scarecrow's going to cause us a lot of trouble in the future, but we're going to have fun with him. Then it cuts to Wurzel, who turns to the camera, looks at the audience, but without any jollity, with this pure malevolence, says, those kids are going to cause a whole lot of trouble. Something like, I'm going to have to keep my eye on those kids in the future. And you think, Jesus Christ, it's a really scary, eerie scene. He's not quite the jolly innocent that he becomes.
Maybe they thought, we've got to change tack with how dark we're going to make this relationship. Yeah.
It's weird though, you say, Reece, they know what they're doing. Like, it seems to come up quite a lot with some of this stuff in the 60s and 70s, or 70s and 80s, just like they're almost trying to properly scare kids on purpose. So there's definitely intent there, you think?
I think there must be, yes. And of course, kids, I think, can... Maybe we underestimate them as well. I mean, I don't know what children of today are like, but we were being not spoon-fed in the way that I think we've maybe slipped into. So, to watch Chucky or to watch the Sapphire and Steel, the stories are very sophisticated and labyrinthine, and we were just expected to follow it and understand it. And Children of the Stones and the Stone Tape, they weren't particularly for kids, but I think we were given stuff that I think they weren't shy of thinking, this is going to be scary and dark, and it didn't seem like there was a threshold that they were working to. It felt like all bets were off and you could just show anything, and if it was scary, so be it. But maybe it was because we were kids and it was more scary than it was. But you look at it now and think, why were we allowed to see it? It's so the images are so sort of disturbing even now. I mean, and it isn't sort of retro specs that you look at it sometimes. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? You get people that you show stuff to that you think is disturbing and scarring for life, and they laugh at it. And have got different perceptions about what's scary and what isn't. But of course, and I think Jeremy talked about it on his episode with you about how sometimes when you see something back, we couldn't look at it back and watch it and go, it's just a man walking by with a stupid rubber pair of gloves on. It was like a flash of it, and that was how it was meant to be seen. And so you're doing it a disservice to go, right, well, cold light today, me stop freeze framing it, it's rubbish. Well, it might be, but that's not the way we first saw it. It was on and it was gone, and you ever couldn't see it again. And it's just in your mind, this image that grows and grows and becomes this other thing that scares you and continues to scare you. And obviously your re-remembering of it, it turns it into something else, turns it into a nightmare.
Reece, can we get your third and final scar then, please?
Yes, my third and final scar is a particular episode of The Adventure Game, which was on. And it was early. I mean, I don't know if people don't know it. It was a sort of an 80s forerunner of Crystal Maze. So it was like, and it was all set on the planet Arg, and 2 celebrities and a real person, a normal human being, not in the world, would land on the planet, and they would have to do various trials. And then the last part was the vortex, where they had to get across this thing, and this other invisible sort of vaporizer was also coming toward them, and they had to not walk into the shape of the vaporizer. But one of the rounds during the whole thing was someone in the on the team was a mole, and they had to eliminate who they thought was actually trying to obstruct the whole winning of the game with actually trying. You had to be clever with how you kept it hidden that you were the mole. And the particular episode I remember that's literally scarred me, it's the worst of the scarring, it's good I've saved it till last, was Graham Garden was on it, of the Goodies, Dr. Graham Garden, and he was accused of being the mole, and it wasn't him, and I knew it was, and it is, so you're watching the person getting away with it, and the injustice of it, because I remember him, like, he was so sad, it was horrible, and he'd been brilliant and really helpful to the game. And he's standing there, and he had to, and the way that they got them, they accused them, and then they were vaporized and they vanished. And last thing he said before he was accused, so they said, "We think it's you." He said, "But I'm innocent, I tell you." And then he vanished with his paper. And I remember it literally scarring me, and I nearly cried.
But I'm innocent, I tell you.
Isn't that weird? The injustice more than anything else,
It was the absolute injustice of, because I liked Graham Garden anyway, and it was like they'd killed him. They sort of had to. And I remember meeting him. We met them. We met the Goodies, and I talked to him about this, and he said, "Yes, I'm still scarred about it. I feel the injustice." I love that he remembered, and it was a thing for him even.
That was it. You've just reminded me. That was that thing of, there was a small spate of those kind of game show with effects kind of thing. The game show Nightmare for Kids, that would have the kid with the helmet on and the 3 kids who would be watching on the screen, but they would fall foul of traps. They would it was very basic effects, obviously, but they would fall off a precipice and fall to their deaths. Or one of the death counter, if they ran out of food or starved, was the human head, where the bits of skin would fall off, revealing a skeletal face, and then the eyes would roll towards the screen as they died.
We had a lad in our school, this is honestly true, called Dick and Hares. That was his actual name, Dick and Hares. And as if that wasn't enough of being a legend, I swear to God he's called Dick and Hares. And he then he went on Nightmare. So as if like your position of legacy is not enshrined enough, having a name like that you can't even shorten.
Wow.
If you wanted to try and book a table or order a pizza, and then you go on Nightmare as well. So it's like double legend status for him. God bless him.
Did he beat
lost.
it?
God bless him.
Hardest game show
it
on
was.
television.
It was. Dave?
I watched the adventure game recently, and part of the game is to work out the value of the coins.
Yes, the whole Drobner business.
And I worked it out in about 5 seconds flat, just coincidentally, and they couldn't find it for 20 minutes, and it drove me around the twist. I was probably sitting there, a 58-year-old man screaming at the telly, saying, "For God's sake, it's the position of the colour in the spectrum times by the number of sides." It's
but you're a maths teacher.
No.
That's a good point.
Yes, that is true. That is true, yeah. But I just it drove me around the twist. But the people getting vaporized, I think favourite TV stars being vaporized on a week-by-week basis was not a good thing for me either.
Yeah. Well, I did my first escape room, real-life escape room, a few weeks ago with my new girlfriend. She's Polish. All I could ever think was, I'm in the adventure game.
Right.
I'm buzzing. Because it was like being in the adventure game. She had no frame of reference, so she didn't understand what I was getting so excited about. But I was kind of picking up the puzzles and trying to put stuff together and thinking, I feel like Duncan Goodhue or like he's in Graham Garden. And there wasn't the threat for that one was we'd been kidnapped and put in a cabin, and the kidnapper was going to come back and chop us up. So we had an hour to go before the kidnapper comes back. But it was just, for me, it was exactly the same as the what was it called? The vaporizing beam at the end of the
vortex.
Game. You had that lovely lattice.
Vortex.
The vortex, yeah.
And it was with this episode, it was Carol Shell, the play school. She was the one that accused him, and that was another betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
terrible.
Another person you trust.
She was lovely.
Yes, it was all just the world slipping through my fingers. It was like, this is just monstrous. And it was all done before I even had my tea. And then I was back to school. It was like, I've been planning to recoup. I'd convalesce.
Well, there we go. Your three scars, Reece. Number 1, 2 Ronnie's Teeny Todd. Number 2, Wurzel Gummidge Handsome Head, which I'd actually not seen before, so that will terrify me for the rest of my life. And number 3, the adventure game, The False Accusation. Reece, it's been fantastic to have you on. What's coming up next? I know, obviously, you've just said earlier on you're working on the 9th series or season of Inside No.9. Any other projects you've got on the horizon?
There's a few things that will come out that I can't talk about yet, but they're, we're going to do number 9, and then maybe we've got talk of a live play version of number 9. So that will be the next. It won't go away for a while because we've got plans to do a sort of live version of it somehow on stage. So that'll be exciting. So we've got to sort of embrace the fact that it's live in whatever way we can to make it different again from the TV. So more anthology on stage probably.
Amazing. Well, it's been an absolute honour to have you on the podcast. Reece Shearsmith, thank you so much for talking to Scarred for Life.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Well, there you go. That's it for this week. Thank you again to Reece Shearsmith. We'll be back next week with another special guest sharing their deepest, darkest fears. We want you to get in touch with us. Share your fears and your scars too. At Scarred for Life 2 on Twitter, Scarred for Life Book on Instagram, or contact at scarredforlifebooks.com. You've been listening to Scarred for Life. Thank you for joining us. And remember, do have nightmares. We'll see you next week.